Hey guys, it's Merce. Welcome back to Harpies in the Trees, where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. Today, I have a really cool video for you. It is a little grouping of some of the authors from Served Cold, the anthology, and all of us are going to talk to you about the true story behind our short stories, inspirations, fun, creative ways of showing you a little piece of the story. There's a lot here, and it's going to be fantastic. I hope that it inspires you to pick up the book. You can go down into the description box and pick a copy up. All proceeds go to charity, and you'll be supporting us. That'll make us feel really good inside. And I think that these collections are really cool. They're sort of kind of catching a moment in time, of people who are on YouTube and doing stuff, and just like the community in itself. So it's a little bit of a time capsule in a way. So I think it's pretty awesome. But right now, at the moment, I am up here in the north of Germany, and I saw that there was a bunch of snow, so I really had to do an intro. Didn't want to waste any of this snow. Thank you so much to all of the authors who agreed to participate, taking time for me. I know it's a busy time, holidays and all that kind of stuff, so I am really touched that you guys took a moment out of your day to make some videos for us. Also, I want to thank Regina St for putting together Served Cold. I really love these collections that she's doing, and I hope she continues to do them. Really nice to be included and asked to participate, so thank you. And yeah, so without further ado, let's begin.
Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex with Bookworm of the Damned, and before I share my recipe, I would like to thank Mers for including me in her video. Now, as soon as I discovered that Served Cold was being released, I was really excited because I knew it was going to have a lot of really great contributors to it. So, of course, as soon as it hit, I downloaded a copy onto my e-reader. And even though I haven't had the opportunity to start reading it yet, the title alone inspired me to make this cocktail that I'm simply calling Bitten Heart. To make this drink, you will need absinthe, blue curacao, creme de menthe, rum, and a raw egg. If you are allergic to eggs, skip the egg. First, line your glass with absinthe. Next, combine a shot of blue curacao, a shot of creme de menthe, and a shot of rum to your shaker. Next, crack the egg and discard the yolk. Add the egg white to your mix. Give it a good shake, then add ice, shake it again, serve, and enjoy. Well, that's my concoction, and I would just like to remind everyone, if you are allergic to eggs, do not include the egg with this drink. Pretty much the egg is just there to give it a velvety texture and to add to its appearance. Also, since the holidays are over at this point, I hope everyone had a good holiday season, and Happy New Year.
Bleary-eyed and cold, I woke up, surrounded by people, all looking down at me. I strained to bring my surroundings into focus. The faces I saw were all normal. Grubby, homeless, normal faces. Still, their stares pushed into my face. I had to look away. Tilting my head to the side, I could see through a knot of legs to the road beyond the mouth of the alley. Right to the spot where I saw, whatever it was. "Help him up, Billy," a voice called out from somewhere. "Hang on. Let him come round." Billy appeared in my vision. He was on his knees by my side, supporting my head. "What were you thinking? Could have burned yourself bad." "Where did he go?" I winced when I spoke. "We're still here. It was you that went." "There was someone looking at us, right there on the corner." "Hush. You'll have people thinking you ain't in your right mind." Billy looked at Jimmy and gestured for him to move the crowd of orphans away. I blinked at Billy. I felt him take my elbow as I got up, unsteady. With a filthy hand, I wiped my soot-smeared face and looked out to where I saw it. Nothing. What's going on, everybody? My name is A.B. Frank, and I've got a story in the Horrortube Anthology, Served Cold, and it's called Sweeping the Side Street. So we're following a young boy who's a chimney sweep. It's set in the Victorian era, so we're following this chimney sweep, and most of the story takes place in an alleyway. They're burning fire in a brazier to keep warm. These orphans on the streets who are all chimney sweeps are doing other things untoward just to get by because they don't have any other way to make money. Now, there is a supernatural event that causes the events in this alleyway, but there's not too much more that I want to give away apart from one thing, because Merce said that we can do something, a reading or some sort of thing, background about the story. Now, one of the characters who I won't name just in case I change my mind on the character and then you'll be none the wiser, but one of the characters in the story is going to be a recurring character in some of my future work, some short stories that I'm planning, maybe even a longer work way down the road, but definitely in some short stories that are coming up. I'll let you decide which one that is. It's a first-person story, so it's not necessarily from the person's perspective that we're following in this story, but someone in that story is going to feature again in the future. So I'll let you all try and guess who that is once you've read it. But thanks again, Merce, for having me on, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Hello, I'm Alfie. I'm the author of Frostbite, which is one of the short stories in Served Cold. And when I first heard about the theme of this anthology, cold, obviously, I was really intrigued, and my mind immediately went to a true story that I've been fascinated with ever since I was a child. And that is the story of the Terra Nova expedition. And so I based my story on this true story, very loosely based it, very much inspired by it though. And so I thought I'd give you a sort of vague overview of what the Terra Nova expedition was all about. It took place between 1910 and 1913. And the main goal was to be the first people, or at least the first recorded people, to reach the South Pole. But there were a number of other scientific goals of the expedition as well. One of these was to retrieve eggs from emperor penguins. On this scientific team was Apsley Cherry Garrard. He was a 24-year-old assistant zoologist, and he was only really there because he donated what was then considered a quite significant sum of money to the expedition. Anyway, they retrieved the penguin eggs, although it didn't really go that smoothly. The main expedition to the South Pole was then brought forward as a group of Norwegian explorers arrived, and they wanted to be the first to get there. So the British team set off on their expedition, but things just weren't going well. They were low on food, people were getting dysentery and lots of frostbite. So the team's leader, Captain Robert Falcon Scott, decided that he would go on with 4 other men. They pushed ahead and eventually reached the North Pole, but it was too late. The Norwegians had beaten them to it a whole month earlier. So after they rested a bit, they turned back, but they were completely devastated that they hadn't been the first to reach the South Pole. Although realistically, that was the least of their problems. They were not in good shape at all. They were ill, sick, injured. One of the men, Edgar Evans, was particularly unwell. He'd fallen a few times on the ice and he had quite serious frostbite. He later collapsed and died on the ice. Next to go was Lawrence Oates. He had frostbite in his left leg and was slowing the group down. When they were lying in the tent one evening, he opened the flaps and left and sacrificed himself so the group could move along a bit faster. But it was too late to save the 3 remaining men. Captain Robert Falcon Scott, Dr. Edward Wilson, and Henry Robertson Bowers all died in their tent. So yes, that's a very brief overview of the true story that inspired Frostbite, my short story in Served Cold. It's my first attempt at horror, so I'm sorry if it's a bit rubbish, but I hope you enjoy it.
Forgive me for letting myself in, but
I understand. Sudden storms always ensnare something helpless. I'm most grateful you aren't a bear.
well, I'm just glad you weren't some axe-wielding maniac. Lucky for me, you chose such a remote place to live. I would have surely frozen to death.
Yes, I came across your vehicle a ways back. When I saw that it was empty, I assumed whoever was driving would make their way here. If they were fortunate enough, that is. Would you like a blanket?
Yeah, thank you. This has got to be a weird situation for you. Coming home to a strange person and all.
I've sheltered many strangers. It's the least I could do given the circumstances.
I appreciate it very much.
I will prepare something to get you warm. The storm will not be letting up anytime soon.
I don't wish for you to bother over me. I've intruded enough, and you have been beyond hospitable.
Curious, why were you traveling through?
Work. I go wherever the job sends me.
I suppose you weren't expecting a storm such as this one to come your way.
I knew there'd be a storm, but knowing still could not prepare you for actuality.
Very true.
Won't you join me? I'll feel less like I'm imposing.
I do not require sustenance at this moment.
At least come closer to the fire.
I prefer the cold. Why are you so formal?
My apologies. Just a way for me to remember, keep things straight. When you're passed around as much as I was growing up, you come up with tricks to cope.
Passed around.
Yeah, fostered all my life.
Sorry.
Don't be. I was well treated and well educated. One of the lucky ones.
With no family.
Correct.
No one to miss you.
I guess not, unless you count my truck.
Again, sorry. It's important to me that your needs be met, that I am a suitable host.
I've noticed. What happened to you?
Pardon?
Been around enough to know when someone is compensating, trying to right a past wrong, fill a void, lessen some hurt. What happened to you?
You're right. I have to admit that my reasons are far more selfish. My generosity suits my needs.
Well, I guess warmth and kindness are the welcome side effects of your compulsory generosity.
Indeed.
What's shaken? My name's Cam. I wrote a short story for this beauty of an anthology here called Red Albums. I've written quite a lot of horror short stories, especially in the last couple of years, but this one is the one I'm pretty sure I'm most proud of so far. Most of the horror short stories that I've written have been kind of fun, goofy twists on spooky ideas. But for Served Cold, I knew I wanted to try something a bit different. I wanted to write something a bit more dramatic, emotional, and serious, and hopefully chilling. What I ended up with was Red Albums, which is a story about a young man who has to go back to his childhood home, which is in a snowy valley, kind of isolated from everything else. A home that he never wanted to see ever again, so that he could look after his sick father. I can't tell you too much about the story, of course, but what I will tell you is that the young man Ted, the reason he doesn't want to go back to this childhood home of his, despite how much he loves his father, is because when he was young, when he was a teenager, he was a drug addict. A lot of memories are tied in with that home that makes it a very traumatic and horrible place for him to be, but he cares so much about his dad and his father's dwindling mental state that he knows he has to stick it out so he can be there for him. Just like his dad was there for him when he was going through his tough time that I just mentioned. And during the time that he's there, he starts to realize that his father's sickness isn't exactly what it seems, and the home is getting strange visitors. He's noticing weird things that he's pretty sure weren't there when he was younger. The mystery builds and builds towards a climax, but the main focus for me when I was writing the story is that I wanted the themes of the actual story to kind of parallel the location that it's set in. The whole theme of the anthology is cold, and the memories of his addiction and the stress that it put his father through is mirrored in the cold isolation of the valley that they're in. If anyone who reads this story can take away anything, my hope would be that it's the feeling of dread and kind of an internal questioning of what you would go through for someone you love. Would you face memories from your past that have severely damaged your life? And what do you do when things start getting harder and harder due to outside forces that you simply can't explain? It's about love, it's about fear, it's about guilt, but most of all, I hope it scares you.
Oh, hey creeps! How's it going? My name is Cameron Chaney, author of Autumn Crow and Autumn Crow High, and the host of Library Macabre on YouTube. And I am coming to you today from my living room very sick. I have been fighting a cold all weekend long, which is, I guess, kind of fitting for this video. It's what the winter is all about, and that's what this book is all about. Served Cold, edited by Regina St and Steve Donoghue. This is the new Horrortube Anthology that I happen to be a part of. My story is the first story in the book, and it is called Karakon Kolos. And before I get into the inspiration behind my story, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Merce for putting this video together and for inviting me to be a part of it. Thank you for giving us authors the chance to talk about our stories and to describe the inspiration behind our many strange ideas. Karakon Kolos is actually a Christmas cryptid. It is a malevolent goblin from European folklore. And if you know your Christmas cryptids, you're probably mostly familiar with Krampus. He's worked his way into the mainstream. But there are some other different cryptids out there that don't get the same exposure as Krampus. And I wanted to go for that when I was thinking about what I wanted to write for this book. I wanted to choose a cryptid that doesn't get as much exposure, as much attention, and go with that. Of course, there are many different variations of Karakon Kolos throughout different cultures and folklores. So I kind of just picked and chose what I wanted to use. I also took a few liberties with this one. There is one version of Karakon Kolos, I believe it's Turkish lore, and it involves the goblin calling to you from the woods with the voice of one of your loved ones, mimicking them, so that way they can lure you into the woods and you'll die of exposure to the winter elements. There's also a version of Karakon Kolos where the goblin will break into your house and raid your fridge and eat all of your food and jump on your shoulders and control your brain and take you on a ride throughout the neighborhood and make you do terrible things. There's one that will also break into your house after dark and eat your children. Of course, there's one that serves only to punish adulterers. There's so many different kinds, and I recommend just going on a binge and reading up on some of the different characteristics of the Karakon Kolos. It's very fascinating and quite hilarious, honestly. I think I've already overstayed my welcome here, so I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. I'm going to go back to bed and watch some more reruns of My So-Called Life. Hope you guys have a good one. I hope you enjoy Karakon Kolos and the rest of Served Cold. Thank you again to Merce for inviting me along, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, author D.L. Tillery here, the Mistress of Horror. I wanted to let you know a little bit about my short horror story, Fractals, that is in the Served Cold Anthology. I would like to also thank Harpies in the Trees for putting together this collab. It's time to be served cold. I wanted to give you a little insight into the main protagonist is Tillery Ito. Tillery is very somewhat self-involved. She's very demanding, and she can have a bit of a temper when the occasion calls for it, which in the end could be her downfall. You know, we really need to rein in that anger sometimes, but not hold it. Fractals is a tale about anger taking a hold of you, and without you learning to control that anger, could be your downfall. The story leads from Tillery preparing to take her trip with Drake, her boyfriend. But the trip soon turns cold once they reach their destination. This tale will bring you intrigue and beasts, possibly. You'll just have to read it and see. Please enjoy Fractals and stay scared.
I'm keeping my distance. I've got my gun drawn. If he comes any closer, I won't shoot to warn. Very merry solstice and a shitty new year. I didn't get that far with the lyrics. Hello, I am Dane Cobain, the author of Black Solstice. I believe it's the final story in the Served Cold collection. And that was one of the chapter headings. It's basically a story about an evil Santa Claus. You don't want this guy coming down your chimney. And each of the sections is preceded by a little bit of Christmassy songs with lyrics such as, does he ride a red-nosed hellhound? Are there weapons on his sleigh? And of course the classic song, poem rather, by Clement Van Helsing, 'Twas the night before solstice when all through the shack not a creature was stirring, not even a bat. And basically Santa's a vampire, and instead of wanting him to come down your chimney to deliver some presents, you don't want him to come down your chimney because he's going to take away your children and do vampire things to them. So Mers asked me to do a little video where I talked a little bit about it. I guess we'll do a little bit of a reading. There's a lot of lore. So yeah, let's do a little bit of a reading. Hope you enjoy. The house smelled like garlic. A silver chalice sat on a silver tray on a table in the kitchen. It was filled with a clear liquid, holy water from the healing springs of Lourdes, and 2 communion wafers sat on a silver plate beside them. A wooden crucifix lay between the 2 of them. It was midnight on the morning of December 21st. The house was one of several dozen that were nestled beneath the blanket of snow over Greyfriars Close and the rest of Mile End. Upstairs in their bedroom, the Reed family slumbered on. John Reed was fast asleep, his moustache net holding his precious curls out of his nose and mouth. Mildred, his wife, was asleep beside him, though she was twitching. In the other bedroom, the twins were still awake, and they were terrified. Jessie and Jude were 7 years old, and they were just about old enough to still believe in Satan Claus. Some of the children at school had said that Satan was made up by capitalists to sell more products, but Jessie and Jude kept themselves to themselves and didn't give a hoot what the other kids said. Perhaps Satan Claus was just their father in a silly suit, but then again, perhaps not. And they didn't want to take the risk and then find out that they were wrong. John Reed had told them that they were taking Pascal up on his wager. They hadn't known what he'd meant at the time, but then they'd asked Mr. Griffin at the school and he told them all about it. It made a lot of sense after that. Perhaps Satan Claus didn't exist, but then again, perhaps he did. If they took the right precautions and he did exist, they had a shot at surviving. If he didn't, well, they'd just look a little silly. And Jessie and Jude didn't care if they looked silly, as long as they survived. And so they'd stayed up late on Solstice Eve, roaming around the house and performing the final touches, scattering salt circles around their beds and polishing all of the mirrors. A couple of weeks earlier, they'd found some sticks while they were walking by the river, and they'd spent the days between sharpening the sticks with their daddy's penknife. Luckily for them, he hadn't caught them. They'd hung a silver horseshoe above their bedroom door, polished every shiny surface until they could see their faces, and placed mirrors by the doors and windows. In the back garden, tear-shaped Nazars hung from trees, channeling the old magic to protect the house from the glare of the evil eye. The house was festooned with images of Christ, and they'd woven St. Bridget's crosses out of rush to hang in each of the rooms. In their bedroom, a homemade dream catcher made of yarn hung above their bunk bed, occasionally bopping Jude on the head if she sat up in the night. Blown glass witch balls hung in every room, and so did bunches of wildflowers, including branches of ash, oak, wild rose, white heather and hawthorn. Jessie had even asked her daddy to bring her some clippings from the aspen tree at the bottom of the garden. Does it have to be aspen? He'd asked. Of course, she'd replied matter-of-factly. That's the same kind of tree they used to make Jesus' cross, Daddy. They'd scattered mustard seeds on the floors and even convinced their parents to leave the taps on, thanks to the old story that vampires couldn't cross running water. They'd also asked their mother if they could hang some mistletoe, but she'd refused. Mistletoe is a patriarchal tradition designed to apply social pressure to young women until they agree to kiss old men, she'd insisted. I mean, the juice in the berries represents jizz, for goodness sake. What's jizz, Mummy? Never you mind. But the girls were hopeful that they'd be able to wear her down eventually, just like they'd done with the gun and the silver bullets. The 2 girls had been making zero headway until they'd presented their mother with a series of charts and graphs that showed the prevalence of home invasions. She'd relented after that, and she'd been their key weapon when it came to convincing their father. John Reed would have done anything for his daughters, and so he'd purchased an illegal firearm from a guy called Silky at the local boozer. He kept the gun and the holy bullets inside a shoebox in the drawer of his bedside table. That afternoon, Mildred cut her hand while helping her daughters to bake communion wafers. She'd tried to hide it from them, to cover the wound with a plaster before they noticed, but the twins' eyes were as sharp as their intellects, and before she'd even removed the first aid kit from the kitchen cupboards, they told her what she needed to do. You did an oopsie, Mummy, Jude said. You know the rules. And she did know the rules too. It said that any wound left untreated with boiling water was enough to let the evil in, and so the traditionalists poured boiling water over graves during funerals. In the Reed household, it meant that she had to pop the kettle on and take a couple of aspirin. That night she was sleeping with a bandage around her hand. Beware of Satan Claus, for he is coming for you. Serve cold. Read it.
Bookmarks. Get your bookmarks. Bookmarks. Ugh. I don't like working.
If you want that shiny cape you've been asking for, you need to do some work.
God.
Come guess me this riddle, what beats pipe and fiddle? Hotter than mustard, milder than cream. What best wets your whistle, what's clearer than crystal? Sweeter than honey and stronger than steam. What can make the dumb talk, what can make the lame walk? The elixir of life and philosopher's stone. And what helped Mr. Brunel to dig the Thames Tunnel? Sure wasn't it whiskey from Ireland in a Sean? My apologies, but it is relevant. Thank you so much to Merge for putting this video together. My name is Gloria, and my contribution to the Served Cold collection is a story called Water of Life, or in Irish, Ishkabaha, which is another name for whiskey. And both water and whiskey play a huge part in the story that I wrote for the collection. It's a story that I'm very proud of. I came up with the idea for the story because I was reminded of some particular words and phrases that were only used in a very small region where I'm from in Ireland, and it was just sort of mind-blowing that I'd completely forgotten that these existed. And I wanted to write a story about someone who had sort of run away from home and had come back to find these things out again and realized that they were still in her head, and sort of realized that it wasn't just stuff she had wanted to get rid of, but she had lost a lot of stuff as well when she ran away. And it being a horror collection, there is also a ghost in the midst of this story, and I named her the Bon, which is Ban meaning woman and Bon meaning white. It's not that I know of anything from Irish folklore or anything. It was just fitting for the story that I was writing, and the story does take part on a cliff, and I feel like there's a lot of sort of Lover's Leap stories, a lot of urban legends and folk tales surrounding those sort of areas, so I wanted to include that in the story as well, and it's something I'm very proud of. So if you do read it, I hope you enjoy it, and I'm sorry again for the music.
So my story is called Thou, and it was inspired by a podcast that I had listened to, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half ago. I couldn't find the podcast. I was actually trying to look for it so I could listen to it again. But the gist of the podcast was that this guy claimed that he had a demon in his life that protected him and had been with him for a very long time. And this guy wasn't like an occultist or a witch or anything. He wasn't someone who really dabbled in the occult. It's just something that happened to him in high school. A group of him and his friends were playing on the Ouija board, of course. And it just took this one, moment, and this entity came through, took a liking to this dude. He didn't use a ritual, there was no summoning. I mean, there was nothing. There was not even a invocation. So as the years went by, it's not that he was very aware of this demon being around, but something happened and this demon's name came up again. So he was like, I guess he's still here. He's still hanging out. So it was really interesting to me, and it kind of got me daydreaming, like, what would it be like? What would you have to do to get the attention of a demon or to get your own demon? So I started thinking of this scenario, and this is what my main character, she wants her own demon, but how does she get it? So in the world of ritualistic magic, I mean, there's a lot of ideas and concepts of how one goes about summoning demons and ghosts and whatever. Some of them seem very simple, and then others seem extremely complicated. Planets have to be aligned perfectly. It has to be a certain time of the year. It has to be a certain month, a certain day, and you have to prepare all of these implements. For instance, in Negotia, you have to make discs. They're like these little discs that have the symbol or the sigil of the demon upon them, but they all have their own different types of ingredients. Some of them contain mercury, some of them contain gold, so they wouldn't be easy to manufacture. And this would take wizards and warlocks and witches like a very big chunk of their life to prepare. Because not only do they have to prepare the implements and figure out all of the timing and stuff like that, they have to prepare themselves spiritually and mentally, to be able to face these demons, to ask for what they want, to be able to defend themselves, to be able to then banish the demons, whatever. It's a whole entire grueling experience that would probably take years, if not decades, just to get to that point to where you could try. So if you get a chance to read my story, I thank you so much for taking the time to read it, and I also hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, Geeks and Ghouls. This is me, the guy with the strange Greek name in the book, and also known as the Nihilist Geek, or the Nihilist Geek Reads, as my channel is right now. There will be a link for my channel below in the comments, and before I begin, a huge thank you to Mers for making this video. When Regina announced us the theme of this collection, I was in a bit of a pickle. You see, I live in Southern Europe, and what we call winter down here is what people in the north probably consider a warm spring day or something. So there is nothing scary to write if your winter is very mild, right? So I had to come up with an idea of a really scary winter. And let me tell you what, there is one type of winter that really scares me, and this is nuclear winter. The idea of, of debris that have gone up in the air and they cover the sky and there is no sun and everything is dying on Earth. And my story, this grey winter, is this. It's about the outcome of a nuclear winter. What happens in a nuclear winter? What happens to the people who survive it, and how their society would be. And yeah, I think that I won't say more because I want you to read the story. It's more of a sci-fi post-apocalyptic than a horror story, but I firmly believe that a horror anthology should have stories that don't quite fit the horror theme. And I really want to write the story for years and years, and seeing it published right now is very rewarding. And a huge thank you to Regina and Steve for trusting me to be in the anthology, and I hope you read the story and you'll get some chills. And I don't mean winter chills, I mean horror chills. So thank you very much.
It's Regina from Regina's Haunted Library. I am one of the editors for Served Cold along with Steve Donoghue, and I also have a story in the anthology called The Woods and Mr. Softy. So my story is about two teenage girls who get caught up in what's known as a folie à deux, or the madness of two. So a very famous case of folie à deux was in 1924 when Leopold and Loeb, two young men, decided they were going to just randomly kill a boy in their neighborhood, which they did, a 14-year-old boy, and they thought they were so smart they were going to get away with it. Well, one of them dropped his custom-made glasses at the crime scene, and they were caught and tried. Clarence Darrow, the very famous lawyer at the time, actually defended them, but they both went to prison and were never really remorseful about what they had done. Another case was the Parker home murder case in 1954. Two teenage girls in New Zealand got so involved in this shared fantasy that they decided that they wanted to kill one of the girls' mother, who was trying to separate them and keep them apart. There's a movie version of this case that's excellent by Peter Jackson called Heavenly Creatures, starring Kate Winslet. I think it might have been her first film. Anyway, it's really, really good. And it gets into their fantasy and their shared hysteria The Schuyler Niece murder in 2012 in West Virginia could be considered folie à deux. Actually, my short story is inspired by that case a lot because I was obsessed with that case and I read a lot about it. And it was a very sad case of these two girls luring one of their friends out for a night of partying, took her out to the woods and stabbed her to death. Maybe they were falling out with their friend. Well, that happens. You don't have to kill somebody, but they got so caught up in this shared fantasy. And saying it's a fantasy or a disorder does not in any way excuse what they did, but it gives some insight into what the heck would motivate them to do such a thing. And then there was the Slender Man stabbing case back in 2014 in Wisconsin, where two 12-year-old girls, thinking that this mythical creature, Slender Man, who was like a creepypasta story character, I believe, they thought that he was commanding them to kill their friend, and they took the girl out to the woods, like in my story, and stabbed her. She didn't die, fortunately. She was able to crawl out, and a man was riding his bicycle and saw the girl who they had stabbed. The two girls went to, because they were 12, I think they went to like a mental hospital. The one just actually got out on parole. So yeah, that's folie à deux, and it's very scary, but fortunately very rare. So that is what my story in Served Cold is all about. Thanks, Merce, for including me in your video.
Hi everybody, I'm Ryan Stroud. I'm coming to you live from my classroom. I'm a teacher. I am one of the authors in Serve Cold. My story in there is called Snowboy, and it's a very close personal story to my heart. But I wanted to basically take this opportunity and talk about the story and how I got to this point. So I am an author that was published in the original anthology called Local Haunts. My story in there is called The Gentleman. And that story came about with, in reference to me reading a story that I completely despised and hated, and I wanted to write something that I felt like would be better. And what I've come to find is when people read The Gentleman, which is a super short story, in fact, I think it's the shortest story in Local Haunts, people either loved it or they hated it. And that's totally fine with me, because at least they have a feeling or an impact by it in some way, shape, or form. And that's great. But I wanted to go a different route when writing my story, Snowboy and Served Cold. And that one has a really big impact upon me. The main character in my story is sort of part me, part fiction, and the relationship between the main character and his son, it closely mirrors the relationship that I have with my son and the struggles that we have had through mine and my ex-wife's divorce, essentially. But also, to add to it, I was heavily influenced by Cameron Roubique, who is the cover artist of Local Haunts and Serve Cold, and I love his books as well. One of my characters in my book, or in my story, takes very big reference from the eyes in all of Cameron Roubique's covers and stuff. So I wanted to make a special note of that and say Cameron Roubique played a huge part in my story as well. Great author and great artist. I'm very thankful to be a part of this collection, and I'm just blown away by the fact that I get to be included in a book with all these other incredible authors. So thank you very much. Hopefully you guys enjoy my story, Snowboy, and enjoy the rest of the book.
I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and follow these authors and creators. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this very chilly day. Be sure to like and comment down below and to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Once again, just want to thank everybody for participating. Shout out to Regina, and yeah. So please take care of yourselves. Look out for each other. The new year is coming. I hope it's a good one.
I hope that all of you fleshies remember who is the coolest skull in the world? It's me. And Happy New Year.
See you next time.